Zlatan Ibrahimovic. 983 games played, 572 goals scored. He's won trophies in 6 different countries, conquered 2 separate continents, and has made a name for himself with his larger-than-life personality. But despite all his records and accolades, there's a couple of big holes in his footballing CV, which taint his chances of being remembered as one of the greatest ever. Most remarkable of all being the fact he's never scored a goal in the pinnacle of all sporting events worldwide. This is the story of how Zlatan Ibrahimovic became the best player to never score at a World Cup. Rewind over 40 years to the 3rd of October 1981, and a boy named Zlatan Ibrahimovic was born in Malmö, Sweden. One of 6 children, Zlatan's upbringing was certainly unique. Raised by his Bosnian Muslim father and Croatian Catholic mother, Zlatan has certainly faced tough times in his life, often discriminated against in his own home country. His family life was far from ideal as well. As a child, his mother was arrested for stealing goods, and social services had to intervene and sent a young Zlatan to live with his father. Sadly, his father was poor and likely facing an alcohol addiction, as in his home, food was scarce and the fridge was packed with beer. This meant that Zlatan would have to run to his mother's house in order to eat dinner, and to feed himself, he would often shoplift or steal bikes. As well as his father's alcohol problem, his sister was also a drug addict, and most devastatingly of all, if we fast forward to 2014, when Zlatan had supposedly made it out of the struggles, he tragically lost his older brother, who was aged just 40 at the time. But despite all this, Zlatan made the most of the cards he was dealt. David Lagerkrantz, co-author of Ibra's book, I Am Zlatan, said that he's a guy wounded by his upbringing. In his position, 99 guys out of 100 would have gone under, but he used his anger to make himself better. That became his motivation. Often described as cocky, arrogant and self-centered, away from football, this couldn't be much further from the truth. Of course, when somebody says things like this, they open themselves up to these connotations, but with a backstory as complex and difficult as Ibra's, I don't think it's right to call him arrogant, when his persona is likely something he grew to protect himself from the dark place he was forced into as a youth. And when the media is so quick to cover his more, let's say, interesting antics, it's irresponsible for them to not mention all the good he's done. Zlatan paid for football pitches for the youth of Malmö to play in, giving those who had grown up in a similar situation to he had, a place to escape. In August 2014, he paid to send the Swedish intellectually disabled team to Brazil for the World Championships. And later in 2015, tattooed names of 50 people suffering from hunger around the world to raise awareness for famine and the United Nations World Food Programme. These are just some of the amazing deeds Ibrahimovic has done, and yet you very rarely hear about them from the media. The fact is, Zlatan is not only an incredible footballer, but also a great man who hasn't forgotten where he came from and does what he can to prevent anybody from ever receiving the same treatment he had as a child. Now that I've covered his complex upbringing and exposed some of his unique character, let me cover his footballing career, and particularly his international career, so we can see how a man self-described as the best in the world has never scored at a World Cup. Zlatan spent a little under 3 seasons at Malmö to start his career, in which he would score 18 goals in just 47 games by the age of 19, when he would then be given his international debut against the Faroe Islands on the 31st of January 2001. The game would end 0-0, and Zlatan was unable to make the biggest impact, but the big man would have the opportunity to make 4 more national team appearances that year. After 3 caps, he'd still not scored, but on the 7th of October 2001, Zlatan Ibrahimovic scored his first goal for Sweden, and as they say, the rest is history. Ibra finished his first year in the national setup with just 5 appearances and 1 goal, but having made himself a key name in the team sheet. Sadly for Zlatan though, he started 2002 slowly for the national team, not scoring in 5 games before the World Cup, and therefore lost his place as the starting centre forward. In his first World Cup, he was an unused substitute for the opening 2 games of the group, against England and Nigeria, although he didn't seem to be missed as Sweden had scored 3 goals in 2 games and remained unbeaten. Although they had a big challenge up next, with Argentina being their final opponents, and if Sweden were to lose, then they would be out of the competition. 59 minutes in, Anders Svensson scored the opener, as Sweden went on to get the draw they needed to top the group, with Zlatan coming on in the 88th minute for Henrik Larsson. In fact, it would be a then 30-year-old Larsson who'd scored the opener in their last 16 tie against Senegal, but after a 37th minute equaliser from Henry Kamara, Zlatan was brought on in the 76th minute as Sweden searched for a winner. Sadly, Ibra failed to make an impact on the game, and in the 104th minute, Kamara scored once again, and Sweden were knocked out, with Zlatan's first performance at the World Cup being subpar, even for a 21-year-old. Now, one thing I hadn't mentioned is that by this stage, Zlatan had earned a move to Ajax due to his impressive club form, and it would be at the Dutch Giants where he grew as a player. After a full calendar year at Ajax, his international goal scoring would increase tenfold, scoring 3 goals in just 4 games in 2003, and then a very impressive 2004, which saw Sweden qualify for the Euros. Sweden were drawn into a group of Bulgaria, Italy and Denmark, where in the opening game, Zlatan would score an assist in a 5-0 win against their Bulgarian opposition. He would then score Sweden's only goal in a 1-1 draw with Italy in the 85th minute, with Sweden then securing their qualification through the group with a 2-2 draw against Denmark in the final game. After carrying Sweden to the top of their group, Ibra was unlucky enough to see his nation face the Netherlands in the quarter-finals, the country in which he played his club football. After 120 minutes, neither side were able to score, and so the game went to penalties. 2 penalties deep for each side, and everybody had scored thus far, with Zlatan up next. The 23-year-old skied his penalty, with Sweden going on to lose the penalty shootout 5-4. And despite Zlatan having starred for his country, he let them down when it mattered most. 2004 wouldn't be completely bleak for Zlatan though. Coming off the back of a season in which he was involved in 28 goals in just 39 games, the big Swede earned a move to European giants Juventus. Ibra enjoyed a great first season at Juve, winning the title as a Bianconeri star man and finishing as their top scorer over club legends like Alessandro Del Piero and David Trezeguet. However, in his second season, he was moved out wide to play more of a role in build-up sequences, inhibiting his goal scoring. It's fair to say he wasn't the most pleased and would end up leaving come the end of the season, but not before one key event, the 2006 World Cup. Zlatan's goals had once again carried his nation, having scored 8 goals in 8 games in qualification to get his fellow Swedes to the World Cup. But as I'm sure you'll know by now, he was unable to succeed once dragging his nation to the world stage. In Sweden's opening game, they would face Trinidad and Tobago, and despite easy opposition, Ibrahimovic was unable to score. And in fact, he was unable to really affect the result at all, as Sweden were held to a 0-0 draw to start their World Cup. Next up would be Paraguay, where at half-time, once again neither side had scored, and Zlatan would be subbed off after receiving a knock. The game remained level until the last minute, where Ibra's replacement, Marcus Ullbach, would assist Freddie Ljungberg for the winner. The injury also meant Zlatan would miss the final group game against England, which ended in a 2-2 draw, and both of Sweden's strikers, Henrik Larsson and Marcus Ullbach, scoring. Both Sweden and England had already confirmed their progress into the knockouts before the game. However, the match cemented the fact that Sweden would be finishing in second and facing none other than host Germany in the last 16. Despite his good form, Marcus Ullbach would be dropped for Zlatan going into the last 16 match, where after just 12 minutes, Germany had put themselves 2-0 up. And in the 35th minute, centre-half Teddy Lucic would be sent off, and going into half-time it was all but certain that Sweden would be knocked out. However, in the 53rd minute, they'd been given a penalty. But despite these days, Ibrahimovic being the obvious option to take the penalty, at the time he wasn't, particularly after his miss at the Euros 2 years prior. And so the experienced Henrik Larsson stepped up before missing Sweden's golden opportunity to get back into the game. In the 72nd minute, Zlatan would be subbed off, making his final appearance at the 2006 World Cup. Sweden went on to lose the game 2-0, and with an aging squad, it was unsure whether they'd still have the quality in 4 years' time to qualify once again. Having made a big money move to Inter Milan, Zlatan would be incredible at club level, but failed to score a single international goal in both 2006 and 2007. And going into the 2008 Euros, he had specifically gone 14 games and over 2.5 years without scoring for the national side. Of Sweden's starting 11 at the Euros, 6 of them were over the age of 30, and so it was clearly a squad past its best. Fast forward 3 games, and Zlatan would bag twice, but Sweden would lose as many times, finishing third. The likes of Freddie Ljungberg retired after the competition, and Sweden then faced a battle in qualifying for the World Cup, drawing a group featuring both Denmark and Portugal. It would be against Portugal in October 2008, where Zlatan would captain Sweden for the first time ever in a 0-0 draw. If we fast forward a year, with just 2 games left, Sweden found themselves in a playoff spot. However, we're yet to play group toppers Denmark. With Portugal having 2 easy games remaining, everything was on this clash. If Sweden won, then they'd move to top of the group. If they dropped points, Portugal would overtake them and knock them out of qualification. Ibrahimovic and Larsson lined up together up front, and with 79 minutes gone, the game was still 0-0. But then, none other than Niklas Bentner set up Jakob Poulsen for the only goal of the game, with Sweden all but out of the World Cup already. Portugal won their final 2 games and took the second place spot, and Henrik Larsson, alongside many other Sweden players in this time period, retired, having failed to make the World Cup for the first time in the 21st century. So where did this leave Zlatan? He was now 28 years old and would be pushing 33 by the next World Cup, and so the story of his international career changed. It was in this period of time where we arguably saw some of the most iconic Zlatan performances in a Sweden shirt, with the giant hitting the prime of his career in his early to mid-30s, unlike any before him. At club level, he also enjoyed his best years yet, having become a world champion at Barcelona before winning the league at Milan, and then becoming the second best paid footballer in the world with a move to PSG. Zlatan scored 2 goals in Sweden's 3 matches at Euro 2012, and would go on to score 11 goals in 11 games for the national team in 2012, before another World Cup qualification stage. It was specifically after the Euros, where Zlatan's international goal scoring exploded even further, scoring one of the greatest goals of all time with a 40-yard overhead kick against England, probably being his best strike of the lot. But in terms of World Cup qualification, Sweden had scraped through 2 wins against footballing minnows, Kazakhstan and the Faroe Islands, and then 1 hour into their game against Germany, Ibra saw his nation 4-0 down. He then grabbed a goal, kick-starting an incredible comeback, resulting in Sweden drawing the match 4-4 in the 93rd minute. After scoring 6 goals in qualification, Ibra had fired Sweden into a playoff spot, where they would come up against a familiar foe in Portugal, the side that had finished above them in 2009. It was expected to be a battle between the two stars, Cristiano Ronaldo and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and there was no letdown. The first leg ended 1-0 to Portugal, with, you guessed it, Ronaldo scoring the winner. And after a goalless first half, the second leg exploded to life, after Ronaldo put Portugal 2-0 up on aggregate. In a manic 11-minute spell, Zlatan equalised on the night for Sweden in the 68th minute, before dragging them level on aggregate 4 minutes later. But following just 5 minutes after, Ronaldo put Portugal back in charge with an equaliser, and another 2 minutes later, finishing off his hat-trick to take Portugal to the World Cup and sending Sweden home. Zlatan was devastated, and 2 years later, after Sweden were once again eliminated in the group stages at Euro 2016, he announced a retirement from international football, hoping to extend his club career for as long as possible. This meant he would never score a World Cup goal, despite having bagged an incredible 62 in his international career, a record for Sweden. But as we know, Zlatan is just different. Following his best ever league campaign at the age of 35 for PSG, Zlatan joined Manchester United and carried them to a rather unconventional treble. But not just this. In November 2017, Sweden qualified for the 2018 World Cup after beating 4-time world champions Italy in the playoffs. Zlatan then announced he'd come out of international retirement to play at the World Cup. The man was truly incredible. He dominated 7 different countries in club football, winning 13 titles along the way, as well as countless other trophies. And here he was, pushing 37 and coming out of international retirement to play at the World Cup. Except, he wouldn't be selected for the competition. For a man with a truly remarkable career, in which there was twists and turns everywhere and anywhere, this was maybe the most unexpected moment yet. And after trying for 12 years to play another World Cup game, Zlatan would have to watch from home, as Sweden topped a group featuring world champions Germany and have their most successful tournament since 1994. But of course, if you were expecting this to be the final twist in his remarkable club and international career, you'd be mistaken. After missing out on the World Cup, many thought it was the end for Ibrahimovic. He was in the last year of his LA Galaxy contract in the retirement league of the MLS, was 38 and hadn't played a game for Sweden in nearly 4 years. But then, he would rejoin AC Milan in January 2020, and in the most insane year of recent human history, Zlatan would create the most unbelievable footballing headline, as in November 2020, he once again hinted at a return to the national team. Over 2 years since being snubbed for the World Cup, having carried Milan to the top of Serie A against all odds, with the club having been 12th in the league when he joined at the start of the year. And so on the 16th of March 2021, Zlatan Ibrahimovic tweeted 5 words, sending a message to the world: the return of the god. Half a decade since his last international appearance, Zlatan was back. On his second debut of sorts, he'd assist the winner in a 1-0 triumph against Georgia, opening Sweden's World Cup qualification with a win. He'd get an assist once again in the next game, a 3-0 win against Kosovo, and just like that, Sweden's star man had returned, and done it with style. Surely there wouldn't be another twist to this story. Ibrahimovic picked up a knee injury right at the end of the season for Milan, meaning he would miss out on Euro 2021, which was expected to be his return to international competition, since seeing his nation finish last in the same tournament 5 years previously. And once again, while watching at home, Zlatan saw Sweden top their group, including a strong Spain side. In fact, since this injury, Zlatan has been able to make just 3 more caps for Sweden, including a 10-minute cameo in their loss earlier this year to Poland in the qualification playoffs for the World Cup, meaning that despite 2 massively impressive performances at international tournaments in a row, Sweden were unable to qualify for the World Cup this November in Qatar, which would have been Zlatan's final chance at scoring on the world stage. Zlatan Ibrahimovic is a unique character, in life and within football. He's experienced pain most of us could never even imagine, and yet has come through it as one of the greatest players in a generation, in a career spanning 4 decades. And his career has been truly remarkable. A constant mix of emotions, from amusement to anguish, admiration to agony. Zlatan's career featured everything from A to Z, winning again and again, but missing the one W he wanted so badly, a goal at the World Cup. Thank you guys for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Please follow my Instagram on screen now or link in bio, as well as my Twitter and the HITC TikTok, which should also be in the description. Most importantly, subscribe if you're new, and if you made it this far, comment your predictions for who's going to win the World Cup. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your day.